The phone call lasted 42 seconds. Yolanda was in the hallway outside Maurice's bathroom when she heard him laugh. A laugh he would never have let out if he knew she was standing there. Then she heard him say it. "No, I'm telling you, this is the one. 18 months of this and I'm out. Don't worry about it. I know what I'm doing." She stopped walking. She did not breathe. Then he said the part that finished her. "She's clean about it too. No prenup. I checked." Yolanda Briscoe stood in the hallway of a man she had spent 4 months falling in love with and listened to him plan how to take everything she had built. She did not let him see her face when she walked back in. She picked up her purse. Told him she had a delivery she forgot about at the kitchen. He kissed her forehead on her way out the door. She drove home with both hands tight on the wheel. She sat in her driveway for 40 minutes. She did not cry. She thought. Because Yolanda Briscoe was not a woman who cried first. She was a woman who got smarter first. And what Maurice Holloway did not know, what he could not have known from the outside, was that the woman he had spent 4 months studying had spent 12 years learning how to survive men who underestimated her. He had picked the wrong kitchen. You need to understand who Yolanda was before that phone call. Not who she became after. Who she already was. 41 years old. Owner of Briscoe and Company Catering on Statesville Avenue in Charlotte, North Carolina. 12 years of her life poured into a building that used to be a tire shop and now had a 6,000 square foot commercial kitchen. 3 delivery vans with her name on the side, and 17 employees who called her Miss Y because the first cook she ever hired could not pronounce her last name and the nickname stuck. She started with a $4,000 small business loan from her late father's credit union. 1 rented kitchen. 1 part-time assistant. A beat-up van off Craigslist for $900. 12 years later, she was the catering partner for 2 of the largest black-owned corporate events in the Southeast, and she still wore black slacks and a white chef's coat most days because she still spent time on the floor with her team. Devin, her line cook, who sent money home to his mother in Spartanburg every other Friday and whose daughter played point guard for her middle school and whose tournament fees Yolanda had covered twice without telling him why his invoice came back zeroed out. Vernita, who had been there since year 3 and was 8 years from retirement. Marcus, her dishwasher, who worked the 5 a.m. shift so he could pick up his kids from school at 3 p.m. and who had not missed a single day in 4 years. The kitchen was not just a business. It was 17 households breathing because Yolanda kept the lights on. She drove a 4-year-old Honda Accord. Her townhouse in Noda was rented. Her personal savings were smaller than people would have guessed from looking at the business. She had decided a long time ago that what she was building mattered more than what she showed. She had been engaged once. Cleon Driscoll, 39 years old. A heart attack 3 months before their wedding. That was 6 years ago. She had not dated anyone since. Not once. She had told her best friend Ophelia she was waiting until she could think about Cleon without her throat closing. Ophelia had said that day might not come. Yolanda had said that was fine. She kept a relationship with Mrs. Inez Driscoll, Cleon's mother. Sunday dinner once a month. Inez had become the person Yolanda called when she did not know what to do. There was something Inez had been holding for Yolanda for 6 years. Not hiding it, waiting for the right moment. Yolanda did not know about it yet. Yolanda was not lonely. She was full. She was also tired. She had spent 6 years grieving and 12 years building. And somewhere in the last 12 months, her body had started telling her something her mind was not ready to hear. She was 41. And maybe she was allowed to want something else. Maurice Holloway walked onto her property because his construction crew was renovating the bakery next door to her commercial kitchen. He was 43, a foreman with a Charlotte commercial construction company called Whitaker & Sons. 11 years with them. He had a Greensboro accent he never quite shook and the build of a man who had worked with his hands for 2 decades. He showed up early, stayed late, carried his coffee in a thermos because he did not like paying $4 for a cup. The first time Yolanda saw him, she was unloading a delivery from her van alone. 6 cases of produce her morning supplier had dropped off late, and she was running behind on a corporate breakfast prep for 48 people. Maurice stepped over from the bakery side, picked up 2 of the cases, and walked them inside the kitchen door for her without being asked. He did not flirt. He did not ask her name. He nodded once and went back to work. The next morning she said good morning to him. He said it back. For 3 weeks that was all it was. Good morning. Have a good one. Two adults with work to do, keeping their distance. Then on a Friday afternoon when his crew had finished early and she was inside the kitchen plating samples for a tasting, she walked outside to find him still there, leaning against his truck, drinking coffee from his thermos, not in a hurry to leave. She asked him if he wanted to come inside and try a sample. He hesitated for a second before saying yes. She would think about that hesitation later. But that day she just walked back inside, plated him a portion of the lamb shoulder she had braised since 5 a.m., and watched him eat it standing at her prep counter with his work boots still on. He told her it was the best thing he had eaten in a year. She told him he was welcome anytime. He came back the next Tuesday with a question about a finish on the bakery's trim that he said he wanted her opinion on. She walked over and gave it. He thanked her. She knew what he was doing. She let him. For 4 months, Maurice Holloway did everything right. He was not smooth. He did not have the practiced charm of men who had been with a lot of women. He stumbled over compliments. He apologized when his hands had dirt under his fingernails. He brought her flowers from a roadside stand once and seemed embarrassed when she said they were the prettiest she had ever been given. He fixed her sink when it started dripping. He did not ask if she wanted him to. He just showed up on a Saturday morning with a wrench and a replacement part and did it. She thought it was care. Later she would remember how long he spent under that counter looking at the plumbing lines that ran toward the prep room. He met her team, learned their names, asked her line cook Devin about his daughter's basketball season the second time he met him. She thought it was warmth. Later she would understand he had been reading Who Depended on Her. He met Ophelia. Ophelia called Yolanda the next day and dropped her voice like she was sharing something holy. Girl, he's the real thing. You hold on to that one. He met Vernita. Vernita waited until they were alone in the office and looked at Yolanda over her reading glasses. That man has not learned how to lie. You can see it in his shoulders. She thought Vernita was right. Later she would understand that Vernita had been watching the wrong thing. Then Yolanda took him to Mrs. Inez Driscoll's house. She had not done that with anyone in 6 years. Inez served them short ribs and let Maurice talk for 90 minutes. She asked him about his mother in Greensboro, about his siblings, about his father. Maurice answered every question with the slight uncertainty of a man who had not been asked about his family in a long time. When Yolanda walked Inez to the door, Inez held her hand longer than usual. Cleon would have liked him. That was the highest compliment Inez had ever given anyone. Yolanda cried in the car driving home. Maurice asked if she was okay. She told him she was happy. He held her hand at the stoplight on Tryon Street and did not let go until they pulled into her driveway. For months in, 3 of the most important people in her life had vouched for him. She was 41 and she was finally letting herself believe again. That was a Friday. The phone call was the following Tuesday. 42 seconds. That was all Maurice needed to reveal what 4 months of tenderness had really been for. She picked up her purse and told him she had forgotten about a delivery. He kissed her forehead. She drove home and sat in her driveway for 40 minutes. What Yolanda did not do that night is what separated her from most women who get robbed by the men they love. She stayed in that car. She ran the whole thing back. She did not call him, did not drive to Ophelia's, did not go to Inez's house and break that woman's heart with what she had heard. She sat in her driveway and ran through everything in her head, chronologically, frame by frame. She remembered him asking 3 weeks in what her financial structure looked like. She remembered him asking 6 weeks in who held signatory authority on her business accounts. She remembered him asking 10 weeks in about the Bowman contract, the one she had told him about because it was the biggest moment of her career and he was the man she wanted to celebrate it with. She remembered telling him everything. She had given him a map of her entire life. And he had been taking notes. Some men do not steal with their hands first. They study where the locks are. They ask questions that sound like love until you look back at the sequence and understand they were reading the blueprint. Maurice had been reading hers since week 3. There was a man named Reggie Sims. Yolanda had met him twice. Once at a barbecue at Morris's apartment. Once at a Friday cookout in Reggie's backyard. He was 44. He had the eyes of a man who appraised people. He worked, supposedly, in commercial real estate. He laughed too easily and his laugh never reached the rest of his face. She had not liked him. She said nothing because Maurice spoke about Reggie like a brother. Grew up 2 doors down in Greensboro, went through everything together, the years when neither of them had anything. When Maurice said Reggie is my brother, he meant it. That was who Maurice had been on the phone with. That night, sitting in her driveway, Yolanda made the connection between Reggie's appraising eyes and Maurice's careful questions, and the laugh she had heard through a bathroom door. She got out of her car. She went inside. She did not pour herself wine. She made tea. She opened her laptop and wrote down everything. Every question Maurice had asked. Every piece of information she had given. Every time she had seen Reggie. Every story Maurice had told her about Reggie that, looking back, sounded slightly too rehearsed. By 2 a.m. she had 11 pages. She closed the laptop. She went to bed. She did not sleep. She had 3 weeks until the Sterling Bowman contract closed. 3 weeks before she signed a joint venture structure that, if she was married to a man with predatory intent by the time it closed, would give that man material exposure to her business through marital property law. She had 3 weeks to decide what she was going to do about Maurice Holloway. The next morning she went to the kitchen at 6 a.m. as she always did. Vernita was already there starting the bread. Yolanda poured herself coffee at 6 a.m., and at noon Vernita found it still untouched on the counter where she had left it. She poured it out without saying anything, made a fresh cup, and set it in front of Yolanda. Yolanda drank half of it. That was something. She stood in the doorway of the prep area and watched Vernita work. Then Vernita looked up. She read Yolanda's face in less than 3 seconds. She turned off the mixer, wiped her hands on her apron, crossed the floor. What happened? Yolanda told her. All of it. The phone call. The 42 seconds. The 11 pages she had written by 2 a.m. Vernita listened with her arms crossed and her jaw set. When Yolanda finished, Vernita took a long breath through her nose. Yolanda, I know. You cannot be serious about this man for one more day. I'm not. Then we are calling that contract off and you are walking away from him this afternoon. No. Vernita stared at her. What do you mean no? Yolanda crossed to the prep counter and turned her back to Vernita. She took her time before she answered. If I walk away today, he tells Reggie I figured it out. They go find another woman. And I still don't know how much he told Reggie about my business or whether they have anything in motion that could hurt me even after he's gone. Vernita said nothing. I need to know what he was actually planning. I need it documented. I need to protect this kitchen and these 17 people on payroll. I need Sterling Bowman to sign that contract in 3 weeks. Yolanda. And I need to know if he loved me at all, Vernita. Even a little. I need to know if any of it was real. That was the only thing she said that came out wet. Vernita walked around the counter and put both hands on her shoulders. All right, tell me what you want to do. Yolanda wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. I want to test him. Beatrice Penhallow had been Briscoe and Company's accountant for 9 years. 58 years old. A low bun. 3 pairs of identical reading glasses on chains because she lost them constantly. A memory for numbers that bordered on supernatural. Yolanda called her at 9 a.m. She arrived by 10:30 with a leather portfolio and a thermos of coffee. Yolanda told her everything. Beatrice listened without interrupting. She did not write anything down. When Yolanda said the number 17 employees who depended on this kitchen, Beatrice leaned forward in her chair and folded her hands in her lap. She was not an accountant anymore. She was a woman counting households. When Yolanda finished, Beatrice opened her portfolio and took out a yellow legal pad. I need 3 documents. Tell me. 1. A financial statement showing the company in distress. Reversed numbers. 12 quarters rebuilt into a downward spiral. 73,000 in the red with a balloon payment due in 14 days. We mark it draft. Light gray. Corner of page 1. Anyone who looked for it would find it. Maurice will not. Yes. 2. An email from a fake creditor. Threatening tone. Legal jargon. Yes. 3. A frozen account notification that looks identical to what Wells Fargo sends. Yes. Beatrice wrote 3 lines on her legal pad. Now, what is the ask? Yolanda told her about the $40,000. The truck Maurice had been saving for. The side business he had talked about for 2 months. The promise he had made 3 weeks ago, that if she ever needed it, she could use that money as collateral. Beatrice looked at her over the reading glasses. He told you that? Yes. Baby, I am going to write you the script. You are going to ask that man for that $40,000. And we are both going to watch what he does. Yes. Give me 48 hours. For 3 days, Yolanda performed the relationship Maurice had been building. She kissed him good morning. She asked about his work. She let him bring her coffee. She let him touch the small of her back when they walked together. She did not flinch, did not let her face slip, did not give him a single signal. On the second day, she burned a tray of croissants she had been making for 12 years without burning once. Devon pulled them from the oven and looked at her without saying anything, and she told him to throw them out, and she went to the back office and stood there for 2 minutes with her hands pressed against the cold metal of the filing cabinet. Then she went back to the floor. She also watched him. How he looked around her kitchen when he came to pick her up. How his eyes lingered on the walk-in cooler door. How he asked her, on the Wednesday before the test, whether she had thought about whether her insurance policy on the equipment was up to date. Once you knew what you were watching for, the camera record of Maurice Holloway was unbearable. On Thursday evening, Beatrice delivered the 3 documents to Yolanda's townhouse in a sealed envelope. Yolanda read each one twice. Beatrice had done the work exactly right. She put the documents in a folder. She invited Maurice over for dinner Friday night. She cooked for him. She had not cooked for him in 3 weeks because she had been letting him watch her carry the stress of the Bowman contract. Maurice arrived at 7 with a bottle of red wine and a smile she had been watching change for weeks without letting herself name what it was changing into. She would think later about how the smile had been changing for weeks and she had been refusing to see it. That Friday night she made shrimp and grits. It was Cleon's meal, the thing he had asked for on his birthday every year, the thing she had not made for another person since he died. Maurice did not know that. He sat across from her candles and ate it with real appetite and told her it was incredible. She watched him eat Cleon's meal in Cleon's seat at her table and understood. Fully, finally. Exactly what was at stake in this kitchen and this life she had built. She let him eat first. When his plate was half empty, she set her fork down. Maurice, I have to tell you something. And I need you to hear me out before you say anything. He looked at her over the candles. What's wrong? She took a breath that was not performed. It was real. Because what she was about to do was real, even if the document in the folder beside her was not. The company is in serious trouble. He stopped chewing. She told him. The Anders Group lawsuit, a fabricated former client who claimed Briscoe and Company had given his daughter food poisoning at her wedding. The civil suit, the threatened settlement, the demand letter that came on Wednesday. The bank had frozen her business accounts pending review of the lawsuit. The creditor she owed for the kitchen renovation had moved up the balloon payment by 6 months. She slid the folder across the table. He opened it. She watched his face while he read. He read for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. His expression did the right things. The right concern. The right widening of the eyes at the right places. The right shake of the head when he got to the frozen account. But Yolanda Briscoe had spent the last 12 days watching this man as a witness instead of a girlfriend. And she saw what was actually happening behind the right expressions. He was calculating. When he closed the folder, he reached across the table and took her hand. His hand was a little cold. Baby, I'm so sorry. We're going to figure this out. She let 2 tears come because she was an adult woman who had been performing strength for 10 days and her body needed to release something or she was going to break. The tears were not for the company. They were for what she was about to confirm. I need help, Maurice. Of course. Anything. What do you need? She took a breath. I need the truck money. He went still. Just for a second. Just for the half second he had paused before saying yes to her dinner sample the first day they met. But this pause was different. For one moment before the calculation came back, he lost his grip on the performance. His jaw loosened. His eyes went somewhere private. Not greed. Fear. A man who had just understood the size of what he was about to lose. Yolanda hated that she could still recognize the boy under the scheme. Then the calculation came back. And he said it. "Babe, I don't know." She kept her face open. Confused. Hurt. A woman who had not heard him properly. "I just need 3 months. Maybe 4. I can pay you back as soon as the Bowman contract closes." Still on the table. "They're just delaying the signing because of the lawsuit." He took his hand back from hers. He folded it with his other hand on the table in front of him. "That money is for the truck, Yolanda. You know what that money is for." "I know. That's my one shot at building something of my own. You wouldn't have wanted me to give it up for you." She let the silence sit. She watched him fill it. "And I'm not, look, 40,000 against a lawsuit you might lose? That's not a loan, that's a bet. I love you, but I can't bet that on a maybe. You said 3 weeks ago. I said if you ever needed it. I didn't say if you were going under." She held his eyes. He did not look away. He had practiced this part. "I need to think about it," he said. He stood up before she could answer. He kissed the top of her head, the same forehead kiss from the night of the phone call, and he picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and he let himself out of her townhouse. The door clicked behind him. She stood in the middle of her townhouse with 2 plates of cold shrimp and grits and the folder of fabricated documents and did not move for almost an hour. Then she got up, cleared the table, loaded the dishwasher. She picked up her phone. She called Beatrice. "It's done." He left. "Yolanda, give him 48 hours. He'll do something." "You're sure?" "He'll do something." She had given him 48 hours to show her who he was. He would not need anywhere near that long. 26 hours later, on Sunday morning at 9:13 a.m., Beatrice forwarded Yolanda an email. It had been sent to the general info inbox of Briscoe and Company Catering, the one Vernita normally checked, the one Yolanda had asked Beatrice to monitor, by a man named Reggie Sims. Yolanda read it 3 times. "Hello. I am a Charlotte area commercial real estate consultant reaching out on behalf of a client interested in the Statesville Avenue property. We understand the operating tenant may be facing financial restructuring, and we would like to open a conversation about the potential assumption of the kitchen lease in the event of business closure. Our client is prepared to move quickly. Please contact me at this number to discuss." She read it a 4th time. She set her phone face down and leaned forward until her forehead nearly touched the surface and stayed there for a long moment. She had been wrong about one thing. She had thought Maurice might fail the test by hesitating, by refusing the money, by being a man who loved her less than she had hoped but not actively against her. She had not thought he would move this fast. 26 hours. That was how long it took him to call Reggie. Reggie had taken less than a day to put a paper trail in writing. They had planned a long con 18 months. But they had seen her cry on Friday night. They had seen the documents. They had calculated that she was going under and decided not to wait. They were trying to get her kitchen lease before her business officially collapsed so they could open their own operation in her space using her equipment, her supplier relationships, her staff, and her client list. The truck Maurice had been saving for was not a truck. It was the down payment Reggie needed to start their own catering company. Using her bones. She straightened up. She did not cry. She had 3 weeks until the Sterling Bowman contract was supposed to close. She moved it up. Sterling Bowman was 56 years old, a Charlotte commercial real estate developer with a portfolio that included 3 luxury hotels, a private golf community in Mooresville, and the new event venue in Uptown that Yolanda had been negotiating to cater exclusively for 18 months. He took Yolanda's call on Sunday at 11 a.m. She told him she needed to close the contract by Wednesday. He asked her why. She told him the truth. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said something she would not forget for the rest of her career. "Miss Briscoe, I have had 3 women try to do business with me in this city in the last 5 years. 2 of them lost their companies because they did not move fast enough when men they loved decided to take what they had built. You are the first woman who is calling me to move faster. I will have my attorney to your kitchen Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Then she called Maurice. She had not heard from him since Friday night. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was cautious in the practiced way of a man who had been waiting for this call and had already prepared for it. "Hey, how are you holding up? I need to see you." Saturday morning, 7 a.m. at the kitchen. He took a breath before answering. She could hear him controlling it. "Saturday at the kitchen. Is everything all right? Did something change? I need to talk to you about the money. And about us." "Okay." 7 a.m. Maurice. "Don't be late." "I won't." She hung up. She did not text him again. She did not call him during the week. She let him sit with whatever story he had been telling himself for 6 days. On Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Sterling Bowman's attorney walked into her commercial kitchen with a folder of contracts. She signed Briscoe and Company's exclusive catering contract with the Bowman venue at 9:47 a.m. It doubled her business effective the date of the venue's grand opening. It also included one sentence Sterling Bowman's attorney had insisted on after their phone call, a sentence that closed every door Maurice had been planning to walk through. No husband, fiancé, boyfriend, or domestic partner could ever touch Briscoe and Company without written consent from Bowman venue ownership. The clause closed the door behind her. Whatever Maurice Holloway had been planning was already too late. He just did not know it yet. On Friday she called Sterling Bowman again. She asked him a favor. She asked him if he would come to her kitchen on Saturday morning. 7 a.m. She told him why. He laughed for the first time she had ever heard him laugh. "Miss Briscoe, I would not miss it." Saturday morning, 6:45 a.m. Yolanda was in her commercial kitchen on Statesville Avenue with the lights on full and her chef's whites pressed. She had pulled the trays of pastries her staff would bake later that morning and set the prep counters before a corporate event. Everything in its position, nothing wasted. Vernita stood at the far end of the prep counter. Hair tied back, glasses on, arms crossed. She had been waiting 12 days for this. Beatrice sat in a chair near the back wall with her leather portfolio on her lap. Sterling Bowman sat next to Beatrice with a coffee from the place down the block. He had built 3 luxury hotels and seen enough of how people behaved when they thought they were winning. He looked like a man with nowhere else to be. The Sterling Bowman contract, signed Tuesday, sat in a folder on the prep counter beside Yolanda's right hand. The Reggie Sims email, printed, sat in a folder beside her left hand. The fabricated financial documents from Friday night sat in a third folder behind her. 3 folders, 3 documents, 3 answers to a question Maurice Holloway had been asking her in different ways for 4 months without knowing she was the one keeping score. At 7:02 a.m., Maurice walked through the front door of the kitchen. He was carrying a small paper bag. Yolanda would think about that small paper bag for years. He had brought her a pastry from the bakery his crew had renovated the year before. He had stopped on his way to her kitchen, on the morning he believed she was going to give him bad news about a relationship he had been planning to drain for 18 more months, and he had stopped to bring her a pastry. That was the moment Yolanda understood that Maurice Holloway did not have the conscience she had been hoping he had. He had a script. He had been performing every gesture for 4 months. The pastry was a prop. He saw the lights on first. Then he saw Vernita. Then he saw Beatrice. Then he saw Sterling Bowman. He stopped in the doorway. The smile he had walked in with did not have an exit route. Yolanda stood behind the prep counter with her arms at her sides and her eyes on his face. "Come in, Maurice." He came in. The paper bag was still in his hand. He did not know what to do with it. He set it on the corner of the prep counter near the door, like a man surrendering a weapon. "Yolanda, sit down." She nodded at the small folding chair Beatrice had placed in front of the prep counter. He sat. She did not. She slid the first folder across the prep counter toward him. "Open it." He opened it. It was the fabricated financial statement. The one he had read with the right expression and the wrong calculation at her townhouse 6 nights before. He looked at it. Looked up at her. "I don't understand." "Look at the corner of page 1. He looked. In light gray, in the upper right corner, in a font he had not seen on Friday night because he had not been looking, draft, internal test document, not for external circulation. He went pale. She slid the second folder across. "Open it." He opened it. He read Reggie's email. He read it 3 times. Yolanda. The third folder is the contract I signed with Mr. Bowman on Tuesday. Briscoe and Company's exclusive catering agreement for his new venue. It includes a clause that you cannot, by any legal pathway, acquire interest in this company. Not now. Not in 18 months. Not ever. She let that land. I'm not going under, Maurice. I never was. She watched him try to recalculate and find nothing left to work with. He looked at Vernita. Vernita stared back. He looked at Beatrice. Beatrice did not blink. He looked at Sterling Bowman. Sterling Bowman took a long sip of his coffee. Maurice looked back at Yolanda. Baby, I can explain. You called Reggie 26 hours after I cried in front of you. He sent that email the next morning. The two of you have been planning to take this kitchen for at least 4 months. That's what's on this counter. It's not. I heard you, Maurice. He stopped. I heard you on the phone in your apartment 12 days ago. 18 months of this and I'm out. She's clean about it too. No prenup. I checked. I have been awake every night since listening to that sentence in my head. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then he found something. He straightened in the chair and his voice hardened for the first time. You tested me, he said. You lied to me. You made up a lawsuit. You faked the whole thing. Yolanda looked at him for a long moment. No, Maurice. I gave you bad news and watched who showed up. He had nothing left after that. She picked up the paper bag he had set on the prep counter. She put it in his hands. Take your pastry. Get out of my kitchen. He stood. He did not move toward the door. He looked at her one more time. Yolanda, please, just give me a chance to. Out, Maurice. He turned. He walked out. The door clicked behind him the same way her townhouse door had clicked the previous Friday. Yolanda stood behind the prep counter and breathed for the first time in 12 days. Vernita walked around the counter and put her arm across Yolanda's shoulders without saying anything. Sterling Bowman set his coffee down. Miss Briscoe, would you like me to make a phone call? To who? To Mr. Holloway's employer. I have used Whitaker and Sons for 2 of my Mooresville build-outs. I know Reuben Whitaker personally. She looked at him. You would do that? I would consider it the cost of having my new catering partner's full attention starting Monday morning. Make the call. After Sterling Bowman left and Vernita went to start the bread and Beatrice went home to call her oldest daughter, Yolanda drove to Mrs. Inez Driscoll's house. She did not call first. Inez opened the door in her housecoat and one look at Yolanda's face told her enough not to ask any questions yet. She stepped back and let Yolanda walk in. They sat in Inez's living room. Yolanda told her everything. Inez listened without interrupting once. When Yolanda finished, when she got to Sterling Bowman's coffee and Maurice's paper bag and the door clicking behind him, Inez sat for a moment with her hands folded in her lap. Then she got up. She walked into her bedroom. She came back with a small wooden box that Yolanda had never seen before. The wood was dark and the corners were worn. Inez sat back down on the couch. Cleon wrote you a letter 2 weeks before he passed. Yolanda's throat closed. He gave it to me. He told me to hold it. He said he wanted me to give it to you the day you fell in love again. Yolanda could not speak. I have been waiting 6 years to give this to you. I almost gave it to you when you brought Maurice over. I am glad I waited. She opened the box. She took out a single envelope. Yolanda's name on the front in Cleon's handwriting. She handed it to Yolanda. Yolanda opened it. Her hands were shaking but her eyes were dry. It was 1 paragraph. Yolanda, if you are reading this, you have let yourself love someone again. I am happy. Just one thing. Promise me you will not let any man take what we both work to give you. Build it for yourself. Build it for the people who come after you. I love you. I always did. She read it 3 times. She folded it. Put it in her wallet. She looked at Inez. Inez was crying. Without making a sound. She had known too many losses to perform any of them. Yolanda put her hand over Inez's. He saw me. Even from there. He always saw you. They sat together for another hour without needing to say much more. Sterling Bowman made the call Monday at 9 a.m. By Tuesday afternoon, Maurice Holloway had been terminated by Whitaker and Sons for cause. By Wednesday morning, Beatrice had forwarded Reggie Sims's email to the North Carolina Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. The investigation opened by the end of the month. 2 other black women business owners, one in Raleigh, one in Greensboro, recognized the pattern and came forward. The Charlotte Observer ran a feature 3 months later. The catering owner who outplayed the men who came for her business. Maurice Holloway was named in paragraph 4. His mother called him crying. His siblings stopped answering. He moved back to Greensboro. Nobody in Charlotte construction was calling him back. Reggie Sims was indicted on 3 counts of business fraud and conspiracy. Yolanda did not attend the trial. She had a kitchen to run. 6 months later, Briscoe and Company Catering opened its second commercial kitchen on the south side of Charlotte to handle the volume from the Bowman venue contract. Vernita Cosgrove became a 25% partner. Yolanda hired 6 new staff members. She started seeing a therapist for the first time since Cleon's death. Maurice was not the reason. What surfaced was something else. 6 years of grief she had never given herself permission to put down. She was not lonely. She was not in a new relationship. She was not looking for one. She was 42 years old, and on a Tuesday morning in May, at 7 a.m., she stood in her original kitchen on Statesville Avenue and slid a tray of pastries into a convection oven for a corporate breakfast her team would execute later that morning. Cleon's letter was folded in her wallet on the counter where she kept her keys. She was full. That was enough. That had always been enough. Yolanda Briscoe ran a test on a man who had not yet stolen from her. He had not yet taken $1. The crime in his head was not yet a crime in the world. She lied about a lawsuit. She lied about her finances. She used a fabricated emergency to make him show her who he actually was. He showed her. Then she destroyed him. He did not break her heart by leaving. He broke it by staying with a plan. Here is the question nobody will agree on. Was Yolanda's test fair? Or did she manipulate a situation to confirm something she had already decided on the night she heard him through a bathroom door? Drop your answer in the comments. There is no clean answer, and that is the point. And if this story reminded you of a woman who built something with her own hands and keeps calling caution fear because she wants to believe love has finally arrived, send this to her tonight. She needs to know caution is not bitterness. Sometimes caution is the part of you that survived. Subscribe to Storytelling Empire. New stories every week.